So we're going to get a little bit deeper down the technology road now. I'm the creative tech director, you saw up there earlier. So Austin, Texas and South by, it's a real mix, as we sort of outlined at the start. It's a melting pot, really, of all things cultural, technology, and creative. But the tech track is always really alive and well, and it's that sort of blend between startup, enterprise, and technology that really comes to life there. So in its inception, around the early days of South by, it was always around software. And there's always a big new startup launching there, a big new app. Famously, Twitter really got underway there. Foursquare, Highlight, some smaller ones. This year, the ex-founder of Twitter moved on. Biz Stone launched Jelly here, his latest venture. Weirdly, during his launch speech, Twitter went down for 20 minutes. It's an odd kind of moment, but we thought, has he got anything to do with that? Then the conversation turned to hardware. So last year we came back and I was standing here talking about 3D printers, a new industrial revolution, how we're all going to be going off making stuff in our basements, and the evolution of consumer goods will forever be upon us. I guess it hasn't quite happened in that way. 3D printers mainly produce kind of rubbish bits of plastic at the moment, and they're quite slow and not very reliable. However, they have opened many people's minds as to what's possible, and certainly through product development and prototyping, they've been really, really useful, and we've been cracking on with using them for certain things. But this year, the evolution in technology has been purely to wear, so it's wearable devices. And that's a little bit more about what I want to talk to next. So this chap here, in this GIF, is trying to tab between two links in a web page using Google Glass. And you can sort of see how, I think in some ways, some wearable technologies are not quite ready for mainstream yet. And it's funny, the thing about South by is, it's full of early adopters. So there were lots of people out there wearing Google Glass. And for the first time, the phrase glass hole really resonated for me. Because you see people, they rock up there and they talk to you, and okay, glass, take a photo of this. And someone was standing there, one of Adam Abrahami's friends who's moved to Aris, New York now, was standing next to me, and he said, oh, actually, something like that just flashed across my face feed. I thought, it's a new phrase, the face feed's popped in. So wearable technology, some are ready, some aren't. But there's a nice quote here from Ray Kurzweil, who says that in 15 years, computers will be more intelligent than we are, and we'll be able to understand what we say, we learn from our experiences, make jokes, tell stories, and even flirt. And I think that's kind of what the next stage of what we're talking about. It's about computers becoming a little bit closer and more embedded to our lives and our emotions and our intuition. So we chatted a little bit about Moore's Law earlier, its relation to sort of consumer expectations. This is Moore's Law in relation to technology, where it came from. It's a 50-year-old rule, and it talks about how it's all about the size of transistors and how they get smaller and smaller and smaller. We can pack more onto a chip, and therefore more power comes out of them. Our devices get ever smaller and more powerful. The thing is, for the first time in 50 years, the rule's starting to fall apart a little bit. So you can see how this curve is sort of flattening off at the top. That means we can't fit any more transistors usefully onto sheets. The techniques they use to make them are sort of running out. They're getting smaller than the wavelength of light that's being used to etch them. So it's real like nano subatomic particles that we're talking about at the moment. But with that, also, the challenge isn't really around faster, more powerful anymore. The challenge is starting to move into different areas. And this drive towards ubiquitous embedded computing, that's things around wearable, things that are computing that's everywhere, is often driven really by size and by power consumption. So this is a little chip, a little computer, just launched by Intel. It's called Edison. They launched it at CES this year, but they talked a lot about it at South by. And it's the size of an SD card that you stick inside your camera. You're probably used to those things. But it actually has the fully fledged sort of PC-based architecture. So it's an x86 computer, which means that it can run things like Linux. It's a very familiar and powerful computing platform. It's a dual-core processor. Full of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and all those useful things that application developers can use to make really slightly more powerful applications than you might be seeing in sort of current wearable tech that you see at the moment. So this is a big moment, really, that Intel have stepped into this arena. It's previously been run by other sort of lower power, lower speed chip makers. So there's lower power, less battery, and smaller. And then the other thing is around computers, not in the brain, not in the CPU part, but around in their senses. So if you think about their, the sense of vision, what can they see, and other sort of perceptions. What can they hear? What can they understand? What context can they get from the world around them? So this is a shot from the Xbox One Kinect camera. The new one that's come out has got some slightly scary capabilities. So if you can see, it's a little bit blurry what's going up there, but in the green writing it says stuff like expression, happy, engaged, yes, looking away, no, talking, yes, mouth moving, yes, mouth open, left eye focused, it's things like that. And these are just basic stats that come straight out of the camera. So if you want to start writing application, writing advertising, writing software that's completely aware of the person that's standing in front of it, it's now possible. It can do that with multiple people in front of the camera, and it can do smart things like detect your heart rate at a distance of about 10 meters in the room. So some of these kinds of perceptions start opening doors not only for things like gaming that you might imagine living on the Xbox, but also things like marketing and advertising, and but also other social goods. So lots of things we've seen from Xbox doing medical applications, physiotherapy, osteopathy, detecting when someone might have had a stroke in the home because they start behaving slightly differently. So there's a whole range of applications that are going to start coming out due to this kind of perceptive computing angle. Not to be outdone, Intel have also got their own version of this. It does almost exactly the same thing as the Xbox camera, but it's really, really small. In fact, it's this kind of size in length and like wafer thin. They've got a deal signed with a smartphone manufacturer. They've also got Dell and Asus signed up, so they're building it into where you'd normally find the webcam on laptops. So all of a sudden, you're going to start being able to do basic things like gesture control, which is what they're demoing here in this video. But I think as they put the technology out and becomes available for developers to start to play with it, then there's going to be a whole load of other applications that are going to come out that depend on the perceptions and the understanding that this device has of the world around it. It's quite exciting, I think. Another kind of perception that we saw a lot of was around health and understanding how someone's body is behaving and what is the sort of natural vital signs of a body. So I saw a talk by a crazy professor type dude called Dr. Walter de Bruer, based out in San Francisco. And he saw the tricorder in Star Trek, didn't see science fiction, but he saw a business plan. So he was thinking to himself, why is this 400-year-old thermometer still the go-to diagnostic device that we currently have in our homes? It's pretty archaic, and it only really tells you the temperature. So his device, the Scanadu, really essentially does the same thing as a tricorder, which is it's a diagnostic device. You stick it on your temple. Within a couple of seconds, it'll tell you all the vital signs that you can get within A&E. So that's things like heart rate, blood oxygen level, respiration rate, all the useful stuff that you need, temperature, blood pressure, loads more, all the things that you need basically to do basic diagnosis. And he talked about really the need for this because of the situation that we've got to in healthcare at the moment. We've got around 100 million doctors in the world. We've got 7 billion people. And you probably know from the last time you tried to go to a doctor, you're not really, that sort of doctor-patient relationship long-term isn't really there anymore. You get, on average, 4, 5, 10 seconds maybe of his undeviated attention before he starts scribbling something down, and then off you go. So this idea is that we start to move some of those diagnostic capabilities, some of that personal responsibility for your health moves into your own hands, and you can start to make some of those diagnostics at home. And then you can imagine scenarios where they're uploaded, they're shared with your health insurance provider, or however that's going to pan out. But at the moment, he's doing the very front end of it, which is developing some of that software. And I think more and more we're going to see science fiction concepts, science fiction ideas turning into real-world items. There's a science fiction author, Bruce Sterling, who's now been hired by Google, and he's working with the guys who are coming up with driverless cars and contact lenses that can tell if you're diabetic. So there's a real interplay here between science fiction and reality. A couple of other lower-end devices that are coming out, but nice and cheap, £120 iPhone case here called Wello that does very similar things as I just showed you with Scanadu, but essentially you put your fingers on the back of it, and then it sends some electrical pulses through your body, and it works out all sorts of similar type metrics, so BPM, blood pressure, respiration rate, all those things. So it really is people starting to get conscious about their health. And this kind of segues quite neatly into wearable technology. So we've had about 18 years of mobile, so it's time for something new. So wearable technology, 2014. Wide have said so it must be true. But it really feels like it is coming into the mainstream. There's lots of devices that are coming out there. You've probably all seen the Feel Band, Fitbit, all of those things. They started making us aware that data is definitely something that could be useful in our lives. Beyond the basics, sort of how many steps have I done or not done, how guilty do I feel today about the macaroni cheese that I'm going to eat tonight, we start to look at other devices that can start to track different things. So beyond just movement, we've got sleep, exercise, stress. This thing does some quite smart stuff with light to work out the amount of nutrients that release into your bloodstream. So that's about to launch here from Ario. We're also seeing specialist wearable devices pop up. So this thing was a startup looking for funding over in South by. They're called Atlas, and they are a specific wearable device for when you're down the gym. So, you know, the number of reps you've done, different kinds of exercises you can program into it, and then it'll know what you've done. So it's very focused on certain activities. These chaps, again, one of the finalists in the startup wearable devices startup competition in South by. What NIME does is the guys behind this have worked out that the little graph that you see on the EEG machine, that is your heart rate pattern, that goes bips up and down, you don't want to go flat, that thing is actually very unique as an individual. So when you put this device on, what it'll do is work out whether or not it's you, based on your heart rate, and then beyond that, it'll then create a Bluetooth sort of signal to all the other devices in your world, so that when you walk up to it, it unlocks things. That unlocks your phone, unlocks your computer. If you've got digital locks on your house, unlock the front door, unlock your car. It's basically this idea that you can do away with passwords. What you need is a device that you can wear, and it'll create this sort of local field of authentication around you. It kind of makes sense. You know, if you're wearing something, if you can see around you within a few meters, kind of the range of Bluetooth, then the things around you are allowed to talk to you. So interesting propositions moving out of pure activity tracking, which is what we see a lot of at the moment. So moving off of wearing things on your wrist, these guys have come up with a ring. This is a wearable device based on a ring that is actually a controller. So you slip it on. It's got the accelerometer similar to the kind of stuff you see in your phone, but it can do stuff like as you type. You can see here it's creating words. You can send those off. You can control devices, switch on lights, all those sorts of things. Feels like when you see the idea, you think, hey, that's quite obvious. You know? But I think it's a brilliant idea. But then there's another load of devices that are coming out at the moment. And these are sort of smart wearables, the Gear Neo and the Gear Fit. You've got the sort of original Kickstarter poster boy of these guys. This is the Pebble watch itself. It's got a whole load of applications that run on it. And you've got Google launching Android Wear very shortly, which is their version of Android specifically for smartwatches. And this is Motorola's smartwatch, first people to do a round watch, as it happens. Now, I think what's interesting about these types of devices is they could eventually replace all of the other specific devices that we've seen. Because really, when you think about it, if you've got something on your wrist that can do all of the activity tracking as well as a whole load of other stuff in your life, do you still really need those single-use devices? It's like, do we still really carry around cameras and diaries and notebooks and dictaphones? Probably not. Smartphones replaced all of those things. So my prediction is the kind of time is limited for those single-use wearable devices. And as these sort of smartwatches become more pervasive, more powerful and smaller, driven by some of the technology advances we saw a few minutes ago, then I think this is what's going to be replacing those other devices in time. So, loads and loads of apps, of devices, of things you can wear that are starting to track us. So we're starting to become this overwhelming sense of data is landing on us. And the challenge becomes then, what do we do with that data? How do we understand what it means for us? And the thing is, they're all separate and they don't interoperate. So, I've had a Fitbit, a Shine. I do my cycle tracking in Strava and Endomondo. I've tried counting what I eat in MyFitnessPal. None of those things really integrate very well. They try a little bit, but not well at all, which is a pain. There's a couple of platforms that are coming up and trying to do that for you. So here's TickTrack. You can log in with a whole load of different devices that you've got. You can put in some goals that you want. But then you still, in my mind, you still end up with a dashboard of information that either rewards you and boosts your ego if you're doing really well, or just makes you feel guilty if you're failing and falling behind. There's not much going on in between those two states. And that's where I think we start to get to some quite interesting ideas around what the progression is and what the future is for wearables and the data that drops out at the back of them. So right now, we're down here, we're at data capture, we're at measurement, and that's important, and people are starting to understand what that means. The next, as you move up, you get to context, lifestyle context. So that's as I talked about computers and things, understanding a little bit more about where they are, who they're talking to, the environment they're in. They're going to start to get a little bit smarter. But the next thing really is moving from that insight up to action. So how do they become prompters for us? How do they start to change our behavior in ways that are quite integrated to our lives, ways that aren't going to need us to do a whole load of thought, but they give us the right piece of information at the right time to change our behavior and make us just be better people and ultimately a better society. So a couple of examples here of how brands and companies have started to use the wearable technology space, and not in the same way that we're looking at here, because earlier all those examples were all about individuals and self-improvement, really. But these guys, the people behind AlertShirt, it's Foxtel. Now this is a kind of device that they want to give to their super fans, to the really hardcore sports fans. What happens here is you put the shirt on, and you get this kind of haptic feedback from what's going on in the game. So you've got someone out there playing rugby, they get bashed into, all of a sudden you've got motors, you've got pressure that appears in the shirt, and it means you can feel that stimulus straight away into your body. You've got these sort of physical sensations from the athletes on the field straight through to you. You've got to mimic a thumping heart as someone's racing across the field. So you can imagine how some of this stuff is really going to create really immersive, engaging experiences. And if you're a brand, if you're a channel, if you're a media partner, if you're any of those things, you can start to facilitate that, and that really gives you a really powerful position, I think. There's another company here that's quite interesting called Lightwave, and what they're trying to do is sort of solve that problem. So if you're, that DJs have, if you're a DJ and you're at a festival or an event or a gig, it's almost impossible to get feedback back from the crowd of what's going on. Do they like it? It's a very disconnected experience. So what this is similar to an activity band. You stick it on, and how people are moving or dancing, you're getting that sort of feedback in real time, so you can start to sense, does this work? Doesn't it work? And you can adapt your show on that basis. Now, these things are really cheap, so the idea behind them is you give them all out at the start of the show, people take them, they wear them, they react, they create lights, they send feedback. At the end of it, they give them back. It's similar to the 3D glasses you get when you go and watch a 3D film at IMAX or whatever. So those kinds of ideas, like low-cost wearables that could be used for events and experiential. Could be another interesting space to play in. So 4 quick takeouts. So what do you think, what role can you play as a brand as the technology wraps around your consumer? So as we saw earlier, as technology becomes more integral to their life and their behavior, how do you become a part of that? How do you become helpful? If there's a focus on health and fitness and people want to be actionable around that, how can you activate that desire? How can you become part of that conversation? Think about the data that can be collected from these wearables. What more data do you need in order for you to help more from your consumer? That data's got to be collected. There's got to be a value exchange here. People are not going to hand that over unless it's going to come straight back to them, and there's a reasonable sense and understanding of privacy within that. And then finally, for in this world of self-improvement, we're traveling up that triangle, how do we help our audience improve themselves from the devices and the experiences that we create? That's me.